This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome back to the Hype Squad. I'm Charli McConnell, your host, and today we have Dolly Josette. Dolly is a somatic sexologist, intimacy coach, and former TV producer who helps people reclaim pleasure through body-based healing. After transforming her own life post-divorce, she became a certified sexological body worker and wellness practitioner. Her mission is to guide others into deep embodied joy and unapologetic intimacy and self-love. Welcome, Dolly.
Hello. How are you, Charlie?
I'm good, especially since I said that word correctly. I had to practice
It's
that.
sexological. It's logical that we have good sex.
I love it. I love
Logical.
I am so excited for you to be here. So Dolly and I, just to give a little bit of backstory, we met originally last summer in Tucson at Canyon Ranch at a women's retreat that Emily Morse, Sex with Emily is what a lot of people know her as, was facilitating. And you were her co-facilitator, and you are amazing. And so I'm so happy that you're here to talk and to teach me and all of us all the things.
I know, and I was excited that you and I are not so geographically distant, right? You're in Alabama. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. So I was like, yeah, we got to stay in touch, Charlie.
I know we had to go all the way to Arizona to meet each other, didn't we?
Yeah, for sure, for
I'm
sure.
so excited.
So, yeah, when we met, we were having a lot of conversations. One of the wonderful things that Emily does with her platform, bringing people together. I mean, the number one thing that she does is starting to normalize just talking and having conversations about sex. And so I loved that, like, Canyon Ranch brought her out. It was the first time they had ever done a theme of sexual wellness. And where I come into play is beyond. I'm like the practitioner. She's like the person talking about, like, this is the big game plan, and I'm like the soldier. I'm in the front lines, actually working with people, with bodies, coaching them and helping them unpack and unwind and create new paths to pleasure. So I'm a little bit more of the front lines, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us women that were there to be able to experience the somatic energy and the somatic work that you worked with us, because it was a very intimate group. It was what, 10 to 12 women, I think it was, from all walks of life, all different ages, all different relationship status. And a lot of the women there had never experienced any of that kind of work. And you held it so beautifully. Like it was very cool. And I was very grateful to have met you and to have been in the same space. And so that was a very exciting time. And I went with a girlfriend of mine, which we had the best time. It was so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really fun weekend, very fun weekend.
Yeah. Okay. So, one thing before we start talking about sexy stuff, because I'm really excited, there was
Yeah.
something in your bio that I immediately thought, oh my God, we have got to talk about this. Okay. So, I didn't know, and I don't, how would I have known? But I didn't know that you were a former TV producer. So, that was one thing right off the top. But then tell me a little bit about your connection with Dora the Explorer. Give us that story.
Dora the Explorer. Yeah, back then we helped preschoolers get to their destinations with, where's the map? How are we going to get to where we need to go? I'm the map. Now I'm helping women map their vulvas and vaginas. So let's see. How do I give you the Cliff Note version? So after graduating Boston University in broadcast journalism, I ended up in New York City, worked for Good Day New York. And then what was happening was all these things of, like, going to work at talk shows. TV Food Network was just launching, all the different talk shows, post Donahue. I'm really aging myself now, but the Ricky Lakes, all of that kind of stuff. And I wasn't vibing with the whole news, all that sensationalism. And me growing up Hispanic in New Mexico, but having left New Mexico when I was 7 and living, the Northwest, New Orleans, Colorado, back now college Boston, now New York City, this idea of what it is to be Hispanic American. Like, I'm born here. My family's like 7 generations here, where the borders, the borders crossed us, we didn't cross the border. But this idea that we're like more like we're here longer in America than some recent immigrants, like than my husband's Italian and German families. So this idea of giving voice in media to Hispanic Americans was really important to me. I was married to a Dominican American, grew up in the Bronx. Like this whole thing, we were this like, we're gonna like, he was wanted to be an actor. All of these things were so important to us. And so I decided to say, if I'm gonna make a difference, I really want to start with the children and the perspective of diversity and inclusion so that they can feel important. Because growing up, I wanted to be you. I wanted to have my blonde hair, because these are the images of the Barbies and this. I remember I cut my Barbie's hair, and my aunt had to take me. We found little Barbie wigs.
Stop it.
Yeah. There was a couple of things going on with that, but I would cut their hair, and we found like brunette hair. So it was so funny, like thinking about these images of beauty. And I don't take it away, like your blonde, beautiful self, but it's just this idea of like girls growing up who looked like me, brown skin, brown eyes, all of that. And so when I did my master's in education in New York City, I was trying to figure out what to do. Am I going to write children's books? What am I going to work with? I was teaching young children at the time to understand them developmentally. And then I was able to get in with Dora the Explorer from the ground up. They had a pilot script. And this is so funny. You know nothing about this. We didn't talk about this at all this week. And sometimes it comes up and sometimes it doesn't. So there were 3 non-Latino creators of this series. So Dora was this whole incarnation. It used to be a baby, rabbit and her little baby. It was these knockaround characters. Then it was a little girl with a mouse in her pocket. It was all these different incarnations. So when they came up with the sidekick monkey, and then there were these studies of Annenberg and Children Now about the presence of Latino Americans in media, they greenlit the pilot if they made the protagonist Latina. So then I had been interviewed for some other position, and they remembered me and they said, could you help make her Latina? So I took the pilot script and I was like adding in different elements, like what is this to kind of add it on. And so I remember the backpack character when it would go yum, 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 yum. And I was like, ooh, we could have some bilingual play here if we add in delicioso. Yum, 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 delicioso. So just adding in like nuances like that. And then she had these big green eyes. And I said, we need to change her eyes to brown. And it was like this thing. Well, there are Latinos with green eyes and blue eyes. I'm like, I know I'm married to a Dominican with green eyes, but if you are at the forefront of creating something new, then we need to actually fill this void. And this is back to me wanting to be blonde haired, blue eyed. We need to emulate and the beauty of these brown skinned, brown eyed beauty girls who are this adventuresome spirit. So we went on. I was trained by Dr. Valeria Lovelace, who was the director of research for Sesame Street. She trained me in formative research. So who were my executives is I would take the storybooks out to work with children, with preschoolers like 4 to 7. And we did character studies. That's how the bracelet that she wears, the fact that she has lace socks, like we went out, we had to redesign Boots the monkey entirely because the original design that we had for him, the kids wanted to play with him the least. Well, if he's the sidekick, you need to like want people to love him. The kids, so we went out with different designs. So this is a whole thing. If I've never had biological children. If I had a child, Dora, I was one of the parents of Dora.
Dora's your child. Holy shit, Dolly.
Yeah.
Okay. So my niece, she is 18, turning 19 this year, and the Explorer was like all she talked about. She loved it. It's all we heard, it's all we had to watch. And it's so interesting as like the generations happen, and I've seen it with my nieces and nephews and now my daughter, it changes, right? Like it was Bob the Builder, and it was Blues Clues, and then it was, oh God, I can't even remember, but then Dora. And I think this is so cool for you to share, because I would never have known this otherwise outside of having this conversation. But how cool is that to have been on the front end of history, essentially, right? Like that's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
So I worked with them through 100 episodes at the time. I think between pickups of seasons, I was still married to my first husband, and we were going to pursue more of his acting stuff. So we weren't sure if we can get another pickup. So we moved to LA from New York City, and then they did get picked up again, and also then helped them to develop the Diego spinoff. So, once we got picked up for pilot, then I was what they call a cultural content supervisor, and I had developed the research team. But then by that time, I didn't have my PhD. So then we got in a director of research who she did an incredible job. And I was just like the conscious at the table. And, this thing about Dora and, why these things are so difficult and who are the decision makers, I had to face a lot of no's.
Mm.
I mean, to even convince them about the eyes and the this or the that, there were so many things. And then also, I wanted them to be celebrated and not like being, because they weren't Latino. We got Latino writers, we diversified the staff, absolutely. And I got a team of consultants, who I then would filter things through. But everybody has this really pure point of view, and then we have to like mesh. So my job was like meshing, so that how could we have things? So for example, Dr. Lovelace and I, we did the multiple intelligences as our curriculum. Well, that means like people are spatially gifted, or intrapersonally gifted, mathematically gifted. So for the linguistic element, this is how Dora solves problems on her journey. She has to use math, she has to use spatial intelligence, she has to use language. So we assigned Spanish as the language. But what's fascinating, I remember going to a preschool, it was more of an Asian population, and the little girl was just like, she speaks like me. And I go, what do you mean? When we kept talking, and it was the fact that it wasn't English.
Mm-hmm.
So she knew it wasn't English, but at this time I think we showed a video, so they heard the language. And so it was just this idea, and then a lot of Asian girls thought that she looked like her themselves as well. But it was just this idea that it wasn't English, and that there was empowerment in using language. And so then the other, in other countries, they reverse it so that it's the prominent language, and then they're solving a skill probably with English or with whatever secondary language is there. So it was a fascinating time. And yeah, I thought I was going to be a mom. I thought children's TV was going to be my life. Like, I loved children's TV. Things shifted. I was part of a team that launched a network in LA, a cable network for like acculturated Latino African Americans in the 18 to 34 age realm. We produced hundreds of original hours of programming. And then, yeah, fast forward to me doing this series called American Latino with Daisy Fuentes. And I kept having miscarriages. And I was now married to my second husband. And we just thought the hours, the intensity. And so I took a little break. I didn't know it was going to be a full-time sabbatical from TV. And so I was trying to figure out what to do health-wise. And I studied and I learned about colon hydrotherapy. Um, I was doing it as a client, and I learned all this autoimmune stuff that was going on, digestive stuff. So it just kind of happened. And why this is important, is because being a colon hydrotherapist, and do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so a colonic is if people get backed up.
No,
So
I know what a colonic is,
you know what a
but
colonic
but
is
but explain it for
for others.
anyone who
So
doesn't. Yeah.
a colonic is if you get a little backed up, and a colon hydrotherapist gets a little tube in the rear, and the goal is to create hydration in your large intestines, and then you release waste in a tube. Everything's clean and like there's no ick. Okay, and
Hmm.
there's a couple of different ways to approach it. I did the closed system. When I did this, I learned a whole nother skill that I never knew that I had as a human being. I learned my ability to hold space for people. I learned that making people's nervous system and calming them, or hands on, yeah, I'm putting a tube in people's rears, but really I'm like holding people's bellies.
Hmm.
I'm like the professional, like soother and just calming them down, or just bringing, calming their minds so that they could have a good release. And all these emotions come up, all of these things. Well, this showed me a whole nother world of somatic and nervous system and everything else. So fast forward to me not getting pregnant despite all of these things that I was trying, and a date with my husband and I. There was this book called Brighten Baby where we were learning all these holistic things to prepare our bodies. And it was a doctor that we were working with who was the author. And the chapter on men's health talked about prostate massage. And it caught Jason's attention. And he's like, I have a friend who can teach you how to do this. So, date night, Dolly learning to give a prostate massage. And this woman, Ellen Heed, became my mentor. And she's like, you would be a great sexological body worker. She's like, how are you so like calm and good in this part of the body? I'm like, well, I'm doing colonics now. So I am not, I have no shame. I more empowerment, more love to all these things of the butt and everything else. And so we got a good laugh. We had a good laugh about this. And I think then another miscarriage happened. And I was like, you know what? It's not in my destiny to be a biological mother. I was a stepmother. I had my two stepsons. But I said, let me go do this training. Let's what else, if we're learning new things about sex, like what is there to learn? And mostly I was doing it for my own personal evolution and to continue, for the growth and learning of my husband and I, because in our first marriages it wasn't something that was such a priority in our first marriages. And so we wanted it to be a priority in our marriage. It was like one of the top two, if not three, probably top two things that were like, this is really important to us. And then I practiced it on a few people here and there, and I'm damn good. So now I have a full blown career for the last 10 years doing this.
I love that ownership and acknowledgement of being damn good at it. And good for you. You are really good at it. And I think that a huge step that a lot of people miss is acknowledging that they're really good at what they do and like owning that and stepping into that power, because I know from experience that you are. So I love, well, at least in the parameters that I've experienced, but I love that you're like, I am good at this. Like this was what I was meant to be doing. And I feel like for it was the same for me too, of getting into coaching. I was always this person. I
Mhm.
just didn't have a framework for it. I wasn't doing it as a business. I used to always say I should have gone to school to be a therapist, but what really kind of catapulted it was being a labor and delivery nurse and being with women, just women working through some of the hardest times of their lives, but most like profound in a lot of ways. But like you were talking about the colonics, I'm like, I've done many of those. So maybe I should add that to my list of qualifications.
You know what's funny? It's I actually, when I just redid my website recently, is when I added back in the Dora the Explorer thing, because I hadn't had it in there. And I think because when I deal with children's educational stuff, I am very protective. I am
Mm-hmm.
mama bear, don't bring all the stuff in. Although when I work with clients, women and couples, I do have to go back to childhood, younger stuff as we're looking at how habits, how things, get taught, where even what's called our core erotic themes get developed. And so it's kind of cuckoo, but if anything is about children, I am uber protective. I just did a tour of the Sexual Violence Center here in Nashville. I'm going to be starting to volunteer some time there. And when we did the tour and we went into the children's room, I was bawling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I there's nothing more protective and more precious than the boundaries and protecting our children. So I am all about this discovery and all of these things, but I think I didn't put that in there because I was being really kind of protective of that background of mine.
Sure.
Um, but I also want to put this in there, currently it's something I am proud of. The colon hydrotherapy, I think that's in my bio. I don't remember, but these are things that make me a whole person. Me being divorced and now married to Jason for 16 years. These are all reasons that I think help clients find me
Mm-hmm.
because they know that I love being married. I love, you know, the discovery of how to keep the intimacy alive and vibrant. I'm not immune to the challenges of marriages. I'm not immune to
Mm-hmm.
having been divorced or not having, or having had sex for procreation purposes and being, very disappointed by that. So I think I just wanted to add in the full scope of who I am was as a human to help make it feel safer for people to relate and connect with me as a potential guide to them.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I also think it's special to pay homage to what got you to this place, like all the things that are in your tool belt. It's interesting that you brought up the perspective of like involving any sort of context about children in the nature of like sex, uh, not sex work, but like body healing and somatic energy and things like that. It would have never even occurred to me that those two don't belong. For me, I see it as like, holy shit, like she's not just this, right? She has all of these other facets that create, like you said, the person sitting in front of you. And it's all tools in your tool belt that you will bring out. Like it may not be what you thought you would use it for, but it's relevant. So I'm glad that it was in there when I read it and that we got to talk about it because I feel like that's special. Okay. So talk to me about well, I mean, I told you this before we started recording. I want to talk about how you work with couples, but also how you work with women and how you hold space for coaching both sets of these demographics. So
Mhm.
let's start with the women's coaching because I really want to talk about like the vulva and vaginal mapping, what that looks like for people who are interested in working, and I just want to hear more about what you do. So let's start there, shall we?
Yeah. Well, the premise of my work is the foundation in somatic embodiment. Okay. Our society really caters to cognitive acuity. Um, and I think it's becoming more where the word somatic is starting to be more part mainstream. So it's this idea of the felt experience of being like having the lived experience, how to like make something, really feel the fullness of your emotions, and then finding the sensations and then finding the narrative so that linguistically you're able to communicate your wants and your needs. Because often we'll feel some wants and needs, we'll feel hesitancy, we'll feel disappointment, we'll feel excitement, but then to track it or to then be able to put words to it or to make requests. So a lot of the work that I do, and I think this is also one of the challenges of marketing this work is because it's like not an easy, quick answer. And when people say embodiment, we don't know what that means. But I think that we're very disembodied. And so for people who want to have more sensation, more safety, more connection, more intimacy with themselves, with their partners, finding that embodiment, because we've been so up in the heads. I always say, those bobblehead dolls, like with those big heads that kind of bounce around that people put in cars, like in taxis or something. It's like that's kind of how we've become. And then with the technology, then we're having a placement of attention on screens. So everything is so neck up or out of our body out there. And so I'm about bringing it back to the body, back about what are you noticing? What are you feeling? And so there may be, how to anchor in, how to connect with your body. Does it feel safe to connect with your body? What does your body need? What does it want? From there, then starting to include like, what about, your vulva? Would your vulva want some attention? Would it want a hug? Or with the men, do they, leading them to what I call the equivalent of a cock cuddle, and this all sounds funny and silly, but it's this idea of basically teaching people how to hold space for themselves in their own body. As you start to awaken the conversation with your own body or with your genitals, and what do they need? What do they want? Because we end up just treating our bodies like, oh, it needs this, it needs this, it needs this. Have you checked in with your body? Does your body really want that? Sometimes we're like, oh, I just really want a nap. I'm like, no, I got to get this shit done. Got to go, go, go. So we're just all in that go, go, go mode mentality versus like, I'm feeling into it and I feel like I need to go take a nap. So I'm going to go take a nap. It's this idea of the felt experience versus the overthinker. Now, obviously, we want to blend them all together. So that the mind is supporting the body, that the body is supporting the mind, is supporting the spirit. So that's my holy trinity, right? Body, mind, and spirit. So how do we have them all kind of connect in so that we can have a fuller experience? So it's through embodiment. So beginning with dialoguing, somatic work, influences of early childhood, first sexual experiences, all these things that we need to talk about so that I can really understand. And then what are somebody's goals? So the reason why I'm able to tend to and guide women with their vulva and vaginal mappings is because of the training of sexological body work. So that's a training which in the beginning I was very attached to, like being the practitioner who's administering the touch, like in my office. COVID actually taught me a new way of being able to guide women remotely to do their mapping. So like if I was interacting with you, I could be guiding you right now and I don't need to see anything. So like if you are the practitioner and I'm interacting with my body, I'm showing you how to interact with your body. And with my clothes or my vulva pillow, I'm demonstrating just do this, lean your body like this, do this, do your fingers like this. So I'm guiding you on what to do so that you're like, oh. So we're going step by step, discovering the landmarks, discovering where's their pleasure, where there's pain, where's their numbness. And I'm teaching all of the erectile tissue. Even teaching, that we're going to start with the vulva, just even teaching the word vulva is a big breakthrough for people because everybody, if you look at stand-up comedy or you look at the Nikki Glaser, they're like vagina. And then he saw my vagina. Really? He took a microscope and went inside of your vaginal canal. We're seeing your vagina. Your vagina is outside of your body. So, I mean, I teasingly say it, but it's like, can we educate? Can we all start saying it? It's the technical term. Or if you want to call the whole thing, it's the yoni or the pussy. Those terms are like more inclusive. Yoni feels a little bit more sacred, a little bit more goddess. So all of this work is like, where's the person at? At what level in their sexual evolution are they? And I meet them there. So besides the embodiment, I'm looking and attuning to somebody's nervous system to see, where do I begin? Are we talking about the pelvic floor? Do I need to say below your waist? What are the things that make them feel safe? I may not be talking to my clients and saying even vulva yet. That might be too charged. Saying the word pussy might be too charged. I meet people where they are so that they can have comfort in their body. And or somebody might come to me at a whole other end of the spectrum. So the nervous system is important, because it's not just do this position, do that position. If we're healing things, if we're expanding your pleasure potential, if we're having to eliminate pain, if we're having to uncover why there's numbness, then we have to do an embodied, slow, somatic approach and really like let the body lead us.
I love this so much. I was taking notes because I wasn't going to stop you. Okay, there's so many things that I want to touch back on. So I was telling you before we started recording, I did go back and get certified in sex and relationship coaching. I don't lead with that on social media or anything like that, but it almost always comes up, always in my experience thus far, comes up in some capacity. And I feel like, this doesn't just happen with intimacy from my vantage point as a coach, but there is this like, uh, breakdown of understanding the language that your body is telling you. A lot of times I see it come up as anxiety or tension, and people can't identify what's going on, and it's like, okay, I understand. You don't understand the language. Let's learn the language, right? Your body is sending you signals all day, every day, but most of the time you're either like super dissociated, or you're just stuffing it down saying, I can't deal with that right now. And then the next thing you know, it's gone on for so long. Now you're having like full-fledged panic attacks potentially, or like something much bigger is occurring.
Yeah.
But when you look at it from the intimacy side, and I'll give this share because it's the first thing I thought of when I was training for labor and delivery. So when you go to school to be an RN, you don't really get, at least when I was in school, you didn't get specific training around labor and delivery. You had to wait until you graduated and passed your boards and got your job, and then they trained you on the floor. So cervical exams, for example, you have to learn how to check cervix. And that is hands on. Like there is no diagram, and even hands on, like everyone's is so different. Sometimes they're curved back and you have to hook them and bring them forward. Like it's a whole thing. And I remember the hardest thing when we were learning was what a closed cervix felt like. And we're all like, well, we need to feel a closed cervix. All these women are coming in and they're 2 to 3 centimeters dilated. And how do we know if it's closed? And I remember the woman training, she said, well, your cervix right now is probably closed. Do with that what you will. And we were all like, holy shit, go home right now, give myself a cervical exam. And I've shared that story a lot over the years.
Right.
And almost every time I share it, depending on the audience, it's like, oh my God, you did. And it made me realize in real time that most people, and even myself up until that point, did not know what my cervix felt like, right? And because I had like that was my job, right? That's what I did every single day. I would joke, like I would say, "Hi, my name is Charli," and the next thing you know, I'm checking your cervix. Like, in what world is that normal?
Yeah.
But that's what was happening, and it's sad to me that so many of us, women and men, are walking around having no sort of orientation of our body, right? A lot of women don't even know the differences between, we call it a yoni in my house because it just sounds prettier than vulva, but the difference between the yoni or the vulva, the labia, the vagina, the cervix, the uterus. Like a lot of people do not even know the diagram of that, right? The biology of how all of those things work. It's always been labeled as the vagina for years and years and years. And now things are starting to change, but it is, I remember one of the things we learned in our coaching course was to teach self pleasure without orgasm. So taking that off the table as the outcome, the desired outcome. Obviously, yes, it would be nice, but trying to postpone it, because all you're really trying to do, and it sounds like this is exactly what you do with the vulva and vaginal mapping, just touch, register what feels good, what doesn't feel good, moving around. Like I even got a yoni, a 3D printing. It's rose gold. I love it. It's so pretty. But it's like you can take the labia off, a lot like what I'm sure your pillow that you the tool that you use, and you can see how long the clitoris actually is. But you got to feel around to see those sensations on your own body. So that I thought of that immediately. What was the other thing I wanted to bring up? The virtual sessions. I would imagine that opening up for virtual sessions for you probably gave access to so many more women, because I know just the women and myself included. Like if you told me you were going to touch me and I didn't know you or have like a bond with you, that would be hard for me, right? That would be hard for me to step into. It would still kind of be hard to do it over Zoom, but so much safer for me to know that it's me touching myself and the ultimate goal, right?
That is the ultimate goal, because even those whom I would do work with in the office, we have to think we're in such a society of like, we want solutions immediately. And many of my clients would go home and do the homework and continue to do the mapping. And I would send them audios and I would send them things so that they continue learning and doing what's called remediation to help improve the sensation or their, orgasm potential. But some women wouldn't. And you hit it right on the head. The ultimate goal is for a woman to have agency and to be able to touch and interact with her own body.
Mm-hmm.
That is the goal. So that was my big lesson of COVID. And many women that I've worked with remotely, then they still come in and work with me, or we'll do the vulva remotely and then they come in and then they'll come in for a relationship retreat with their husbands, and then I'm teaching their husbands to vulva map and
Mm-hmm.
vaginal map to teach the anatomy, because there are erectile beds in the outer lips. That's why the vulva is so important. So yoni is a beautiful thing, but even being able to teach like the technical terms, like
Mm-hmm.
yoni isn't a medical term, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love that, you're using that in your household. At a time in the future, I invite you to consider like teaching the different, actual technical parts. Um, and the idea behind it is is just the knowledge. It's
Mm.
just the knowledge, of learning, a different things that, we're I mean, do we know all of the names of the bones and then this in our legs? No, but this idea, and as a mom, you'll have to find the right time or if that feels comfortable to you. But sometimes women go through their own mapping. If I ever did a mapping with you, virtual or in person, you will understand immediately what I'm saying, because you have
Mm-hmm.
to have that felt connection, not like with each of the erectile beds in isolation. And here you being a trained nurse, knowing all of these things, but then there may be things about the erectile beds that you weren't even ever taught.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, like knowing where the anterior fornix is, or what are the vestibular bulbs, or, what is the perineal sponge, and what, is the G spot, the prostate, is the urethral sponge, like what's synonymous, what's the opposite? Why do some people like anal sex? Which erectile bed needs to be online for like somebody to be a candidate to be a yes to having fun and pleasure in anal sex? Like, so we're looking for all the erectile beds. to see what's really showing up already as potential for pleasure, what's muted, what's in pain, and how to resolve the pain, how to heal the numbness so that you can have more pleasure expansion, and how to interact and or self-touch, self-pleasure, and then for the spouses to be able to interact and touch and interact with all erectile beds without this race to get inside.
Mm-hmm. And I'm learning more every day about how common, I don't want to say normal, but common it is for women to have pain during all sorts of kinds of intimacy, not just penetration. And so it is something that a lot of people aren't talking about, but is severely affecting their intimate lives, their relationships, so many things because I'm trying to remember how she put this originally, but the woman who was one of my main facilitators for my coaching certification, she said she started as a business coach. And what she quickly learned is because she was also holding space for sexual coaching was that all of the stuff that came up in sex, or excuse me, in life and in business was like highlighted in the intimate part of your life. And so if she could just start there, all of those things would kind of bleed out into the other parts of their lives. And so she made that her sole focus. And I do think, in my opinion, sex and money are like the two things that no one ever wants to talk about, but it is on the top of everyone's brain. And I think just normalizing the fact that it doesn't mean you're broken. It means there's something we need to dig into. We need to learn about it more. We need to have orientation after orientation and learn your body is a great reminder. More than just a reminder, it's just telling them in the first place for a lot of women.
1,000%. Sex isn't something that you just put in a drawer and put away, although we think it is, because what's in the drawer? Oh, the vibrator. Oh, the dildo. Oh, the lube. Oh, the condoms, right? It's like we isolate sex to this drawer.
Mm-hmm.
But we're like walking, talking, living human beings. Okay. And we are sexual beings, the erotic, this, our genitals, the life force. Okay. So we can go woo woo and all like, Eastern, and it's the life force and the tantric energy and all of that stuff. And we can also just think about, then you go to the opposite end of the spectrum, and like even the word pleasure can feel like a dirty word to some people.
Mm-hmm.
Like pleasure is not a dirty word. Sex is not a 4-letter word. But if I write about the word sex on my Instagram account, I can't even have it be a 3-letter word. I got to make it be a 2-letter word because Instagram police will shadow ban me or something because you can't say the word sex, God forbid, or I was out at a brunch with an aunt and a cousin. She's like a younger aunt who's like a friend of ours. She's married to our uncle. And every time she's like, oh, and then this, and then sex, and then and then sex. And I was like, do you notice that you keep like whispering the word sex? She's like, well, I don't want to say it out loud. I was like, you do whatever feels comfortable to you. I'm just like highlighting that you're whispering it. Like, it's okay. She's like, well, we're not all comfortable talking about it like you are, Dolly. So it's just this idea that it is part of our whole being. And in terms of relationships, what are the things and the like big top reasons, for people to not stay married with our high divorce rates? Usually comes down to money and sex. These are top things. And you know what? There are skills that people need to learn about money. We need to learn about investment. We need to learn about savings. We need to learn about how to make our money work and grow and not live above our means. Or to learn how to feel that prosperous mentality and not be a penny pincher and like, oh, I can only do this, but then you don't open the floodgates of prosperity, right? So there's an energy, there's lessons about money, there's books about money, just like there's books about diet and health, people say, well, why do I need sex coach, or why do I need intimacy coaching? This is all natural. It's also natural for us to feel hungry and to put food in our mouths. But how many health coaches and diet books and recipes, et cetera, are there out in the world?
Mm-hmm.
So feeling into, what are your goals with sex and intimacy? What is it important to you? You know, um, and what does sexual expression look like? Often I'm helping people redefine what intimacy is, because when people think of sex and intimacy, they might have this flash of a movie, like, being pressed against a wall, ripped your clothes off, lifting your leg up, getting penetrated, and a good time is had by all in 2 minutes. But there's so much more to it. When clients come to work with me, they're like, oh my God, the playfulness, the interaction, the connection. We'll do these different eye gazing exercises between the partners. And I am not kidding you, handfuls of people, we haven't looked into each other's eyes since our marriage, our marriage day, our wedding day. And they're married like 30
Mm-hmm.
years.
Yeah.
So consider, if this is consider how easy it is to eye gaze, to look, to be held, to be touched. These are all things that are part of what I would call my erotic equation, where we're looking at attachment styles. We're looking at, your sexual approach. Are you looking for partnership stuff? Are you more geared towards sensation? Are you more geared to, like, what is your role in sex? There's also what's called your erotic blueprint. So we're like looking to see what is natural. If I'm a dark brown eyed girl, my body is going to react and speak in a certain way sexually, that it just naturally gets turned on, that I don't have to like do all this effort. But finding what is that natural thing that actually
Mm-hmm.
turns me on, learning to listen to my body, having the practices, the intimate and somatic practices, to actually deepen my connection with my own body, to learn to ask for what my body and what elicits pleasure in my body. That's where the coaching comes in. That's where the practice comes in, because we don't know how to do it normally. And I think my most recent analogy is like the hunger and the food coaching, because
Mm-hmm.
right, how many food coaches are on, but we're like saving all of their advice. Same thing with
Sure.
sex and intimacy.
Yeah. And I think that the thing with the intimacy coaching is, and the way I see it is, sure, like without a coach, you could try to come to the table and say, okay, I read this book or I read this and I want to dig into it. The obstacle I see when that happens is that you're now you have an advantage over the partner, right? Because you're coming to the table with the knowledge, you're trying to teach them. And so now it's like you have this upper hand in this scenario, and it the scales aren't balanced. And I think there's something really special about having a third person to come in and teach both people, because then whoever's reading or whoever's bringing it to the table doesn't have to wear both hats, right? And I think about like before I was coaching, I've always like coached my husband, right? Like he's always coached me, I've always coached him. And there are things that come up where I'm like, I can't coach through this. Like I need to be present for this. And if I have my coaching hat on, I'm not really taking in what's happening here. I need an outside person to facilitate this. And I feel like with intimacy specifically, it is so vulnerable to but to have someone that you trust and that can hold space for that, to give you the ability to kind of close your eyes and sink into the moment with your partner is imperative. Like that to me is the thing. Like lots of people think, okay, I'm going to read this book, or I'm going to listen to this podcast, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring this knowledge in, I'm going to share it with my partner. a lot of times that's not enough because it really takes learning tools. I can say it from just clients of mine who we have really dug into this stuff with their relationships. A lot of times I'll notice that they want to feel normalized. They want to hear that it's normal that they're going through this and they're not the only ones, because a lot of them are not talking about it with their friends. They don't have a safe space to talk about it. But then the next thing that comes up is they think, once I talk to it about any of it with my partner, then we should be good, right? And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not how that works. Like, it takes constantly showing up, constantly reevaluating what's happening, because just because you had that one, and this is true for everything, it's not just true for sex and intimacy, but it's so much more highlighted in that part. Because sure, 6 months ago, you may have jumped in, you were having a lot of intimate time, a lot of eye gazing, and then life got busy and you went back to this parallel way of living where you're not looking at each other, you're looking out at the world, and you're becoming roommates again. And then, oh shit, I woke up and we haven't had sex or any sort of intimate time together in weeks, and we haven't talked about it. So, working with someone like you, Dolly, teaching the tools, but then also being able to, because I'm sure you probably have clients that come back to revisit, like, okay, we need to relearn these tools again. We're getting a little rusty or something's come up.
Mhm.
That to me is the big game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. There's a lot that you said there. Just because we go to the dentist once in our lifetime doesn't
Uh-huh.
mean we never have to go to the dentist again. Doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have to brush and floss our teeth every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like if we want to have good dental hygiene, then we're taking care of our teeth
Yeah.
every day. If we want to have fit muscular bodies, if we want to, shift from fat to muscle, like, I mean, what is the intention? What is the goal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, there are going to be some people that having sex, um, and defining what is sex for you. What do you want? Do you miss the intimacy of cuddling? Do you want connection? Do you want touch? Um, do you want penetration? Like, what is it that you want? Because you do get to say what you want. And if somebody is like, I'm about love and affection and cooking and running a household, but I don't want to make my body available, they actually have the right to say that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So people get to choose what they want. So I am never the person to say, this is what you need
Mm-hmm.
and this is better. No, it's like, what are your goals? And let me help you get to your goals.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing that I find in this work is honestly how undertouched we are as a society, as humans, and as mammals. We thrive on touch.
Mm-hmm.
I finally heard a podcast where a neuroscientist was talking and validating what I see in my work. Um, in that she said, the podcaster asked, what's the number one like neurotransmitter that we need? She says oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
Oxytocin is the number one thing that we need running through our body to feel love, to feel alive, to feel compassion, to like have like all of these things where she didn't say this in the podcast, but where we've gone to as a society is being very dopamine addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're dopamine addicted, that's the likes, that's this instant gratification. I need this, I need this, I need this, but you lose your perspective. So with the sexological body work that I teach, I mean, when couples come to do an intimacy retreat, in Nashville, I am teaching them how to interact with each other's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm teaching them variety of, but we're letting their bodies lead us. We're like, what we're noticing. We're having the people notice. And what about this? What about that? So we're doing all of these investigations, and then we bring it all together in this gorgeous, what I call tumescence kind of erotic massage, like a four-handed massage. I have gloves on, and then I'm making like connections between the spouses, or I'm telling them, if whether kiss their neck, like it's all about their connection. I'm there facilitating and teaching. Because part of my like Pleasure Muse RX, my like at home recipe, is that they do these one-way touch sessions, a few times a month. Because a lot of our sexual healing happens when we can just be the receivers of touch. And then people say, oh no, it's much better to give. Okay, beautiful. That's great that you're such a great giver, but where is the lesson for you, and why are you having a hard time receiving? So how can we melt these barriers? Now, if somebody really is an authentic no, like I don't want to be touched, and they can give you a litany of reasons why, until one is really ready to engage in that, I'm not here to convince anybody of it. But back to the oxytocin thing, when we are including all of these elements, the pleasure cocktail is when can we activate oxytocin, dopamine, nitric oxide, and all these other amazing endorphins. When we can activate all of these collectively is when you feel fuller. You feel like, oh my God, I just feel like so alive. I feel so pulsating, so juicy, so riveting. And that's when you're also magnetizing the money, magnetizing the clients, magnetizing the partner, because you're filling up your cup. So this is what, your question about women, teaching women to be able to provide this for themselves. And then if you get a willing participant, willing partner to learn these things, then you get to like learn, what do I want? What do you want? And then what do we want? What is the goal for you as a couple? What are your goals individually? Because sometimes you do have to learn the sexual desire or language of your partner's body, and it may not be the same as yours. So having, the respect that, this person needs this. If somebody needs to be gluten-free because they are a celiac, you're not going to be like, oh, come on, you can handle some pizza. Like, no, the person's going to really be sick if they can't have that. So why are you forcing them to do something else? So same thing, all these food analogies, but back to sex. If something's a big trigger for somebody, now if they can learn another way, another perspective, if they can have a different intention, if they can feel the embodiment behind it, something that might feel really off-putting may suddenly be like, oh my gosh, I was making this mean that, but really this. And when I say all of these things, and it's hard to like imagine it because it sounds good, but it really becomes transformative when it's a felt experience. All my couples leave, they're like, wow, we learned more than we ever expected. Wow, this weekend was transformational. We had no idea. And it comes back to this idea, like all the touch that's happening, they leave here feeling so alive, and we are just not touched. You have a daughter, right? So think about when she was little, and you're like lovey-dovey and the tucking in, and depending on all that loving touch. So at a certain age in their adolescence, she's going to be like, yeah, mom, step back. Or yeah, mom, like drop me off down the block. Like I remember doing that to my mom. Like you don't want to be touched. So then fast forward to like, then when we go through puberty, when kids go through puberty or go to college, what the next type of touch that starts to happen is probably going to be sexual exploration. And then what gets touched? All the hot spots, all the yummy, like, boobs, ass, pelvic floor stuff, right? But think about the rest of our body.
Yeah.
Our skin is the largest organ. If we want to bring in full body orgasmicity and expand it, like include the whole body.
It makes me think of the 3 minute game and the will of consent. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Did you do that training? I love that.
I did, and I love
Yeah.
it. For anyone listening, like if you haven't, I'm not going to go into the entire like explanation of it because it can get very complex and convoluted. I actually printed out little cards to give to clients and to people at workshops because when you play the 3 minute game, the basics of it is how do you want to be touched for 3 minutes? How do you want to touch me for 3 minutes? And it's kind of a partner back and forth thing. And what was really cool about it when I learned about it for the first time is the consent aspect. And so there's so many things in my own marriage where it was like I thought he really liked when I did this one thing. And so I offer it up. And the will of consent aspect of it is if you don't want to do it, you have to give a compromise, right? So, like, I say to Dolly, like, I would really love to rub your shoulders. And then Dolly could say to me, I'm not really okay with the shoulder rubbing, but I would let you rub like my forearms. And I could say, okay, cool. I'm good with that. And so there's like this learning of this back and forth compromise where it's not just, I said I want to rub your shoulders. Like, so I'm going to rub your shoulders. It is actively stepping into the dialogue of back and forth and not just shutting down. And what's really cool is we do this pretty often and we'll play music, we'll turn the lights down. It starts as like clothes on, not necessarily sexual. We'll use Alexa to set timers. And then eventually, after a couple of rounds, it becomes more of a sexual game. And what's really interesting and very eye opening to me is that things I didn't think were going to feel good maybe felt good, or vice versa for him as well. And it's such a great touch game to play, especially when you're like, I want to be intimate, but I don't want just a massage and I don't want to just like, a quick hit it and quit it type of thing. It is way more sensual. And in my experience, it's easier for people to get in the mindset of playing the game and then they learn all those things that they're not even realizing that they're learning.
Mhm.
It is a wonderful thing. And that's what I immediately thought of was, oh my God, that's totally the 3 minute game. What was her name? Betty something?
Betty Martin.
Betty Martin. And it's, to dig into the details of it may not be for everybody. Obviously, Dolly and I eat that kind of shit up, I'm sure, but it is it's an amazing experience that I could not recommend more to do with your partner, even with, and I know in some workshop scenarios, they'll do it platonic with people who don't know each other. She actually talks about that when she trains it. But it is a great way of reminding people that touch is so important and it does not happen. So much so that like when you do brush like someone's shoulder or something, there's like this zing sometimes that happens that people can sometimes misinterpret because it's like, what was that? What was that feeling that just happened? Well, it's because you haven't been touched in about, 7 days because you haven't left your house and no one's holding your hand. And it also makes me think of like flirting in general. I have a client where we work on a lot of stuff in her relationship, intimacy wise, and I said, "What do you guys do at night? Like after your kids go to bed, what do you do?" And she's like, "Well, we lay on the couch and we watch TV." And I'm like, "How do you lay on the couch? Where do you lay?" She's like, "Well, we have a sectional, and so I lay on this side and he lays on." And I'm like, "Okay, that's a great place to start. Let's lay together. Let's put your hand on his head. Let's just do some really light touch just to kind of remind each other that you're in the same room. You can still do the stuff that you've always done, but do it closer together. Do it more as a shared experience, or walking in the door and giving a hug or rubbing a back, touching. And for myself too, I didn't realize how long I would go without touching him or without him touching me and vice, so there's so much to that. I'm glad you talked about touch because it is something that I think people really forget. And even if that's not their love language, I feel like a lot of people get kind of hung up on, well, that's not their love language. Their love language is this. Touch is everyone's love language, outside of a couple of outliers that may have some stuff they have to work through with that. Everyone likes to be touched. It's an
Yeah, we're
important thing.
mammals. And
Yeah.
if touch, it doesn't come automatic, or there's a big shield, a big armor around it, there's usually something that needs to be healed. That's
Yeah.
an And again, that's the work that we do. That's the work that
Hmm.
sexological body workers do. So, like in terms of the Wheel of Consent and Betty Martin, she hadn't taught in LA for a long time. I actually hosted her in my home. We did the course in my home and when I was in LA.
That's
Um,
so cool.
and she and I learned about her through sexological body work, because she's also a sexological body worker, and the
Hmm.
Wheel of Consent is a big part of sexological body work training. Beyond the touch, what's great about what I learned from Betty is this idea of giving touch, receiving touch, and then there's what's called taking or absorbing touch and allowing. So there's four different quadrants, and whatever's inside the wheel is consensual and what's outside of it is non-consensual. So these are all things you don't need to go do the training with Betty, but it's open. If this is like speaking to anybody, this stuff of consent and boundaries is applicable everywhere in life, not just
Hmm.
about sex and intimacy. It's you know, there's so many different facets. We could have a whole talk just on that. But these are things obviously that Charli knows about, that she can interact with you on in her coaching. What I interact with people on here in the coaching, teaching. Then do you remember the bossy massage? Did you guys do that in your training?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So
Or at
that's
least I'm not remembering.
it's part of the training. If you did the fuller training, it was something that I did with the Betty Martin training too. So it's this idea of starting to tune in into, like, this is like one of the ways that I get people to start interacting with, well, what do I like? What part of my body does need attention? So just with clothes on the massage table, getting them situated, and then them breathing, and then feeling into what part of my body needs some tension, needs some touch. So it might be like, could you put your hands on top of my knees? Could you massage my shoulders? Could you this? Could you that? So it's this round of things. But what I see as a coach is, I see when people can't ask for it. I
Hmm.
see when people are rushing through it. I see when the giver is embellishing the touch. I see then when somebody's like a dead fish and not active receiving and breathing. So what I learned from these trainings, then I add in all the other trainings that I do to like make that be this full experience of starting to like, wow, I didn't know I needed this, or I didn't know how nourishing that feels. And I'm feeling that love, and I'm feeling so much more connected to my partner right now. Um, or like this couple came in, he's in his mid 70s and she's 69. And we're working through some different aspects because they haven't been intimate for years. And he's each time he's coming in, he's like, this is for her. I want to do this for her. And now this next time, I'm the stuff that we're learning, maybe I want to think about what is intimacy for us again in this next chapter of our lives. So all of these things. And so for the first time, everything was about her being on the table and him getting comfortable doing this. But then he would say, oh, she would want me to massage, and my arthritis and my this. I was like, well, as the giver, you can also say, I'm able to do this type of touch, but I'm not able to do the massage. So even just teaching him like holding, just have presence of your hands,
Hmm.
teaching him energetic touch above her. So he and I started doing that. And she is very energetically like online. So she was like, oh my God, it felt like you guys were touching me. So like finding different ways, because he wants to be there for her. And the biggest aha is we find when we are out of consent with ourselves.
Mm.
So for like him, giving her like, I'm going to really be there and I'm going to do all this massage, but his hands were in pain. Like they reported it on some homework, and and he was in so much pain the next day. And I was like, okay, so then who were you out of consent with?
Wow.
Himself. He didn't take care of his own body first. He didn't put that boundary in. Or, oh, I can do a couple of massaging things for like 2 minutes, but oh, my arthritis is speaking to me. Let's look at presence touch. Let's look at feather touch. Let's look at holding touch. Let's look at energetic. This is what I'm available for. So in that negotiation, like what you were kind of speaking to earlier. So this world, and this is because people say, well, how do I learn what I want? You literally have to workshop it.
Mm-hmm.
So what it sounds like what you and your husband are doing is you're workshopping different ways of being intimate. You're
Mm-hmm.
also what I would call your body mapping, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, yeah.
So here we are like saying vulva vaginal mapping, but yeah, just be in your room, get some music, set the space, and figure out like, okay, I would like every place of my body that is exposed skin. So right now it would be my face, my neck. What is this? The décolleté? What is that term called?
Deca. Yeah. 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 I don't
I
know
always
exactly
mess
how I
that
say it.
term up. It's like this chest, that V part, like for my
Decolletage, something like that.
décolletage.
Yeah.
It's a fancy French word that I
I-
always my
Bougie. It's a bougie
my
word.
my ankles and my feet would be exposed skin in my hands. Okay.
Mhm.
But then that's so many parts. So if it's like one at a time, touch my face, touch my neck. And then what does it feel like if you just have holding? Your body takes several moments. You can't just be like, how does that feel? You just need to be with it. You just need to like be with it for several strokes, you know, and then you're like, then if you start to see somebody's breath deepening, them dropping into their body, then they might say, okay, that feels good. Will you add the edge of your nails to bring some texture? Oh, and if you're not sure and you want them to freestyle it, say, I'm going to give you permission to freestyle all this exposed area, face, neck, and decollage, whatever the heck, chest. So they might just freestyle it. So you don't know often what you don't like until sometimes you bump up against what you don't like.
Yeah.
Have to explore. Do I like holding? Do I like feather? Do I like tickling? Do I like massaging? Do I like grabbing? Do I like fast? Do I like slow? So then with all of this, bringing an embodiment to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that you're dropping deeper and deeper for the felt experience. And so that's embodiment is what creates this feeling of aliveness, this feeling of fullness, this feeling of compassion for yourself, for your partner, brimming with love, joy, and like excitement to like make new discoveries. Because you are never ever going to stop discovering the world of intimacy and connection and love. It
Mm-hmm.
is it is so vast. I have
Mm-hmm.
10 books I'm reading at the same time because I want to learn more. I want to do more with my husband. You know, if you were to say, well, what do you want to learn now, or what do you want more of? I could tell you 5 things that I want to learn more of, as
Mm-hmm.
a person, as a wife, as a woman, then there's other things as a coach, as a business owner, there's just always going to be that. So it's just like you get to experience life, you get to learn. So sex isn't this masterful thing that you're going to go and be this like perfectionist at it. You're gonna wobble, you're gonna make mistakes. What do the movies not show? When ejaculation happens or a mess happens, like, wait, reach for the t-shirt, reach for the
Tissues.
tissues, and you're
That's
like
right.
waggling and grabbing and scooping, and it is not graceful. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there are funny things that happen, and having like a space that you just kind of get to practice. You have to practice, and you have to be able to say, oh, that didn't land right, or oh, can I do a do-over? Yes,
Yeah.
you do. Having the humility and the laughter and the ease, and we're just learning, we're just playing.
It's like a playground. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
There's
it's
so
our
much more. Yeah, there's so much more I want to dig into, but for the sake of time, because I had all these notes and I'm like, no, if I go there, we'll have to do another recording to like keep going on this conversation because there's so much here, especially like really expanding on the will of consent and communication, all kinds of things that I think need to be talked about more. Um, yeah, I okay, so one thing I'm going to put all the ways to find Dolly in the show notes, and that you do have your couples retreat in the apartment you're sitting in right now in Nashville, that you hold space for couples and do their own special retreat for just the two of them, which I think that's amazing. When I was reading your website initially, I think I got a little confused on it being like a group container, but it's not. It is just you have a space in Nashville that can come and stay, and then you come and facilitate for them, just the three of you. Is that right?
Yes, but I'm coming to, so in the retreat experience, I provide accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
I will stock the refrigerator with the goodies that you like. I'm making restaurant recommendations, other city recommendations. I provide parking if you drive here. I'll pick you up at the airport if you fly in. I work with you over 4 sessions from like 10 to 7, 10 to 6:30. So we're doing a morning session for like 3 to 4 hours. We take a meal break, then the afternoon session. Then I leave the apartment. You get to use the toys, the stuff, the view, the massage table, and you get to continue with your homework, your practice, your fun. Go take in some music. Then I come back the next day. Lately, the last few retreats, people have been divvying it up into 3 days where they'll arrive in the morning. We work an afternoon session, we work a full day, then I work the next morning. And then so they're done around 2 or 3. Um, I want it, people are like, oh, can we come in for 2 nights and be quick? I'd like to say yes, but I'll be honest with you, you want to come for 3 nights. And if the schedule allows, honestly, giving yourself a fourth night to integrate and have a day just to the two of you to explore Nashville. One couple, they like had concert tickets for 2 nights in a row. I'm like, could you please just only go one night? You are going to be so tired. People don't realize how exhausting all this body work, all the emotions, all the orgasmicity, all the stuff that comes forward, and then you're like have this focused attention on it, you need to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like people always say that, oh, if I had more time, if I had more time.
Yeah.
So giving yourself that, but you're getting also Zooms ahead of time. We're getting your goals. You're starting to do some embodiment homework before you get here. So it's a beautiful thing. I tried in my LA office to do a retreat with couples with another colleague of mine. It was a beautiful retreat. What ended up happening was awesome because then we just ended up working privately with couples. But I found that the couples just were not feeling comfortable like doing massages with another couple right next to them, like naked. So
Mm-hmm.
as a practitioner, we're like, we didn't, we were just like, oh, well, what's the big deal? It's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So when I recreated myself coming to Nashville, my husband came up with this idea of, me hosting my business, in this beautiful apartment, and the idea of a private retreat. So
Mm.
you can privately have a vacation getaway to a beautiful destination, and then you get your own coach, and then you get your own space, and everything's just set up for you just beautifully.
Oh, wow. I love it. Thank you for explaining it in so much detail because I think that that is something, and you're right. A lot of people, even people who are not super modest or wouldn't be afraid of doing other things in front of other people, I think there is a level of vulnerability that comes into that place of having to acknowledge and be super open and forthcoming, and with other people, sometimes even just your partner and a coach being in the room can be really scary. So if you add more people to that, it gets more
Yeah.
complex.
And
So,
let me also clarify, I'm not sexual with you and you're not having
oh
sex in
yeah,
front of me. Okay. Because people
sure.
get like, what is the misunderstanding? There's a couple of times I'm I'm having the two of you elicit your erotic energy between each other as we're trying to map desires, map turn-ons, map all the sensations. And there's some fun intimacy games that we do that people like, they're giggling, they're laughing, they might be push somebody against the wall and they might be making out, for a moment in this one exercise that I have them do that's always a grand slam. Um, and then when the final day, like this whole four-handed massage, and there was one man who was not about having anybody work on him. He only wanted, he was really shy, and he wanted the focus to be on his wife. When he witnessed me doing her vaginal mapping, and he witnessed how I am as a practitioner, how I was in interacting with the issues that were showing up for her, then after lunch, he says, I saw that and I saw how you are. And I would be curious to see what I can learn if we did the penis mapping on him. Because for men, we can do penis mapping, we can do anal mapping or prostate massage. Um, and so I said, yes, let's talk about what your boundaries are with this. If I were to interact with your body to show her how to interact with your body, I would have my gloves on, or I could show her using a prop, using a dildo, and I never have to touch your body. He says, I feel more comfortable with that. I was like, you got it. So again, this is empowering people to speak up for themselves and to not make assumptions. And I can't tell you how many times, like some of the big breakthroughs for my clients, even just doing remote Zoom series, she's like, I can only have sex with my husband if the lights are out. I don't want him to see me. So back to what you're saying about the vulnerability of nakedness, it can show up between your own, your own husband or wife. And so the growth of that and the exercises, we probably worked 30 hours remotely. We were dealing with a severe trauma issue. And then they came to work with me in person, and we completed healing all of the trauma stuff. And then they called me a year later. They're like, now that we healed out the trauma, we're having so much fun. Can we come back again? Can we now go do some more fun stuff? I'm like, yes, come back again. Like,
yeah, with a fresh perspective, I'm sure.
Fresh perspective. So,
I think uh, having someone there, because a lot of people do misinterpret like a sex coach to think, oh, you're in the room, you're with us while we're doing it. That's not not typically what it is. But I think in a lot of situations, sex, actual intercourse, can get in the way of intimacy. And by having someone in the room that you can't just stop and have sex because you're turned on, you have to like follow these breadcrumbs, can be really helpful. Because if they were alone and they could just say, okay, screw it, let's do it. Like we're so turned on, that's missing the point almost always, right? Because that does get in the way. And as humans, sometimes our self-control is not great. So I think that is probably a huge advantage of having another person in the room who you can't be intimate in front of. Like that's a boundary, so that you now have to explore all these other trails that are coming up for you. So I love that.
1,000%. This couple last weekend, when I came in on the day number 2, um, the husband's like, I think I need to apologize if it sounded like I was being short. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah. Like if I wanted you to leave, I was like, I didn't really notice that, but I think maybe I just interpreted like you were tired or you just wanted to get ready for dinner. Is everything okay? Well, because she says I have to tell you everything, I kind of was like so turned on, like I needed her to take care of me like as soon as you left, because all those exercises we did, like I was just like, oh, I was like, that's great. You
It's
had
such a compliment.
and not to me personally, but he was interacting with
Yes.
turn on, and like the way he was being with his wife and how open and vulnerable she was. And then fast forward to her tumescence massage. She's one who never has climaxed in front of her husband. She's only done it on her own with her own solo touch. And so for her, even though in that sensual massage, it's not often a goal to bring somebody to climax because I want them to actually feel the full body orgasmicity without the climax so they can see how like nourishing and fulfilling it is so that they're not always on this quest of getting
Mm-hmm.
to the climax. For her, it was a goal. And it was the first time that she ever climaxed in front of her husband.
It's a
And
whole new world.
they were just like besides themselves. And they've been
Mm.
together for 17 years.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear more about this. For the sake of time though, because Dolly, we could keep going and going and going. I want you to share something from your hype list before we go. And I typically give a little bit of an intro to what that is. So the hype squad is was named after the hype list, which I give to clients, and it's a way to brag about yourself and be full of yourself and acknowledge achievements that you have done. I would love for you to share just one thing that you can brag about before we finish up today.
I think I am a body whisperer who really puts people at ease, who
Mm,
really makes them feel safe while discussing their most challenging, vulnerable things, or even in being in their nakedness, making them feel safe and comfortable.
mm, I love that.
I think that's my gift.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I believe that wholeheartedly. That's why you're so good at what you do. And so that's amazing. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself. I can't wait to like stop recording so I can talk about more things. But I'm going to put all the ways to find Dolly to learn more about the programs that she offers. And I just thank you so much for coming and talking and doing this. This was such a pleasure. Thank you for everyone being here. Thanks for getting hyped with us. I'm like, what do I do? How do I end this? I don't remember. Thanks for getting hyped with us today. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.